There is a kind of control that never announces itself. It doesn't kick down doors. It doesn't shout. It doesn't leave bruises anyone can point to. It moves quietly, through a sentence, a sigh, a well-timed silence, until one day you look at your own life and wonder how you ended up making choices that were never really yours. This is the paradox at the heart of psychological influence. The most effective control isn't the kind you fight against. It's the kind you don't notice you're inside of. Today, we begin uncovering 7 of the most common tactics people use, consciously or not, to steer, pressure, and quietly command the behavior of others. Not to teach manipulation, but to end it, because the first act of defense is recognition. You cannot protect the door you don't know is open. Let's begin. Trick 1. The guilt transfer. It rarely sounds like an accusation. It sounds like disappointment. I guess I just expected more from you. It's fine. I'm just hurt. On the surface, these are simple expressions of feeling. But underneath, something more calculated is happening. The emotional weight of one person's reaction is being quietly transferred onto another person's shoulders, as if their choices, their boundaries, their very existence were responsible for someone else's inner state. This is guilt tripping, and its power lies in its invisibility. The target isn't told what to do. They're made to feel that not doing it makes them a bad person. Over time, this reshapes decision-making itself. Choices are no longer made from clarity, but from the desperate avoidance of imagined blame. Trick 2. The moving goalpost. Approval in a healthy relationship is stable. You know where you stand. But under covert control, the target of approval keeps shifting. What satisfied yesterday is suddenly insufficient today. The finish line that was promised quietly relocates, just out of reach. This isn't inconsistency, it's architecture. Because a person chasing a goalpost that never stays still will keep running, keep striving, keep seeking validation, and in doing so, remain permanently oriented towards someone else's judgment rather than their own. Trick 3. The quiet rewrite. That's not what happened. You're remembering it wrong. You're too sensitive. Spoken once. These phrases seem harmless. A disagreement about facts. Spoken repeatedly, over time, they perform something far more corrosive. They erode a person's confidence in their own memory, their own perception, their own reality. This is the soft edge of what's often called gaslighting. Not always dramatic, often barely perceptible. But its outcome is severe. A person who no longer trusts their own mind will inevitably begin outsourcing their judgment to someone else's. Trick 4. The warmth, then withdrawal cycle. It often begins with intensity, attention, affection, validation, delivered generously, almost overwhelmingly. And then, without warning, it recedes. Coldness, distance, silence. The target, having tasted that warmth, now organizes their behavior around retrieving it. They begin adjusting, accommodating, shrinking themselves, not because they were asked to, but because the withdrawal taught them to. This oscillation between closeness and distance is one of the most psychologically binding tactics that exists, precisely because it mimics love while functioning as leverage. Trick 5. The manufactured clock. Pressure has a signature sound. Decide now. There's no time to think about this. If you don't act immediately, it's gone. Urgency, when real, is a fact. But manufactured urgency is a tool, one built specifically to disable the slow, deliberate part of the mind that asks questions, weighs consequences, and says, "Let me think about it." Under authentic pressure, people reason. Under manufactured pressure, people react. And reaction, not reflection, is exactly what allows a choice to be extracted before a person has had the chance to consult their own judgment. Notice this. Legitimate opportunities rarely evaporate the second you pause to breathe. Trick 6. The identity trap. This is among the most sophisticated tactics because it doesn't attack behavior. It attacks self-concept. A real friend would do this. If you actually loved me, you wouldn't hesitate. I thought you were the kind of person who doesn't back down. Here, compliance is quietly rebranded as proof of character, and resistance is rebranded as a personal flaw. The target is no longer choosing between two options. They're choosing between an action and their own self-image. And most people, when forced to pick between a boundary and their identity, will protect the identity, even at their own expense. This is why the healthiest response to this tactic is almost always the same. A person's worth is never actually contingent on one decision, no matter how convincingly that idea is presented. Trick 7. The debt that was never asked for obligation is a powerful human instinct. Reciprocity holds relationships and societies together, but it can also be engineered. A favor offered without being requested. Help given a little too generously, a little too publicly. Small sacrifices, mentioned often, subtly building a ledger the other person never agreed to keep. And then, when a request finally comes, it arrives with an invisible price tag attached. After everything I've done for you. This is obligation as leverage, reciprocity turned into a quiet debt collection system. The target isn't just being asked for something. They're being reminded that refusal would make them, in some undefined way, ungrateful. 7 tactics, 7 different disguises. But strip away the surface, and they all perform the same underlying function. They don't take away your choice outright. They narrow it. They quietly shrink the space in which you feel free to say no, until compliance starts to feel like the only reasonable option left. That is the real architecture of covert control. Loss, not force. Constraint disguised as consent. But here is the reversal. The same awareness that lets you name a manipulation tactic is the awareness that dismantles it. A guilt trip loses force the moment you recognize it as guilt tripping. A manufactured deadline loses urgency the moment you recognize it as manufactured. Influence that depends on staying invisible cannot survive being seen. You do not need to become suspicious of everyone around you. You simply need to trust one thing more than you currently do: your own perception, your own timeline, your own right to pause before you answer. So before this ends, one question worth sitting with. Which of these 7 patterns, guilt, shifting standards, rewritten memory, warmth then withdrawal, manufactured urgency, identity pressure, or manufactured debt, have you experienced in your own life? And did you recognize it while it was happening, or only after?